My fingers rested on the manila envelope in my lap, tracing the edges of the document inside. The title company's conference room smelled like stale coffee and fresh carpet, the kind of sterile, hopeful scent that clings to rooms where lives are supposed to change hands. Through the glass wall, I could see the receptionist glance at me and then away, her phone pressed to her ear. She'd been told to expect a family, a celebration. Instead, she got a 32-year-old man in a gray suit, sitting alone at the polished table, with an envelope that held 10 years of my life and a betrayal I still couldn't fully process. The door swung open at exactly 2 o'clock, and my parents walked in first, my mother's face arranged into that bright, performative smile she used for church fundraisers and neighbors she wanted to impress. My father followed, barrel-chested and already sweating through his button-down, jingling a set of keys that didn't belong to him. Behind them, my younger brother Brandon strode in like a groom entering his own reception, his fiancée Kelsey tucked under his arm, her engagement ring catching the fluorescent light like a tiny, accusatory sun. They were all laughing, filling the room with a noise that sounded like relief, like victory. They hadn't noticed me yet. Then my mother stopped mid-laugh. Her eyes landed on my face, and her smile didn't so much disappear as crack. "Marcus, what are you doing here, sweetheart?" I didn't answer. I let the silence stretch until Brandon's laugh died in his throat and my father's keys stopped jingling. They stood there, a tableau of almost gotten away with it, and I watched them realize that the closing they'd orchestrated behind my back was about to become something else entirely, something they had never planned for, because they had never once imagined I would find out. They had forgotten, in their long campaign of entitlement and erasure, the one detail that mattered most. They forgot I never signed the deed. 8 years earlier, I was 24 and eating ramen in a studio apartment so small I could touch opposite walls at the same time. I worked 60-hour weeks as a software engineer, hoarding equity grants and bonuses, denying myself vacations and even decent groceries so I could save every possible dollar. The goal was a simple one: buy a house. Not to live in, I was fine with my shoebox, but as an investment, a tangible asset that would grow while I kept grinding. My friends thought I was crazy. My parents thought I was selfish. Every phone call home included a variation on the same question. "When are you going to help us out, Marcus? Your father's back is killing him, and the rent keeps going up." I had been helping, of course. I'd been sending them $500 a month since I graduated, money they accepted without ever saying thank you, as if I were paying a subscription fee for being born. But I knew it wasn't enough. I knew they were struggling, and I knew the source of that struggle. Brandon. My younger brother, the golden child, the one my mother called her miracle baby, after 3 miscarriages, had never held a job longer than 6 months. He'd float from one grand passion to the next: music production, real estate licensing, organic farming, while my parents covered his rent, his car payment, his failed business ventures. They drained their savings on him and then came to me to refill the tank. So when I finally bought a house, a 3-bedroom fixer-upper in a decent suburb, for $220,000 that would eventually appraise at nearly $500,000, I made a decision that felt generous and, in hindsight, catastrophically naive. I offered to let my parents live in it, not as owners, not as joint tenants, just as residents, rent-free, in exchange for maintaining the property. I'd cover the taxes and insurance. They'd have stability. It was supposed to be a bridge, a way to give them security without draining my own future. I drew up a simple occupancy agreement, had them sign it, and filed it with my own records. The deed stayed in my name, locked in a safety deposit box. The house was mine. They were guests. For the first year, it worked. My mother planted roses along the front walk. My father fixed the squeaky porch step. I visited twice a month for Sunday dinners, and they'd talk about the house like it was a shared project, something we were all building together. "Our little place," Mom would say, squeezing my arm. I didn't correct her. It felt good to be part of something, to feel like maybe, finally, I'd earned a place in the family story that wasn't just the responsible one who pays for things. But language has a way of curdling when left too long in the dark. Our little place became our home. "Thanks for letting us stay" became, "We've decided to redo the bathroom. You can cover the cost." The occupancy agreement, which I'd explained to them in painstaking detail, was forgotten, then resented, then denied. When I reminded my mother gently one evening that the property was an investment and I'd eventually want to sell or rent it out, she looked at me like I'd threatened to burn it down. "But this is our home, Marcus. You can't just take someone's home away." My father nodded, arms crossed. Brandon, who was there for dinner, laughed and said, "Dude, it's family property. Lighten up." I let it slide. I let it slide because I was tired, because I hated conflict, because I still wanted their approval in a way I couldn't fully admit. I let it slide because I believed, stupidly, that love would be enough to keep them from crossing the final line. The house appreciated, the neighborhood gentrified. By last year, the property was valued at $450,000, and I'd paid off the remaining mortgage in full. I had the deed, free and clear. I started thinking seriously about selling, using the equity to buy a multi-unit building, something that could generate real passive income. I told my parents I was considering it, and I gave them a full year's notice, a kindness I didn't legally owe them. My mother's face went pale. My father said nothing. 2 weeks later, Brandon announced his engagement to Kelsey, a woman who posted curated images of luxury resorts and captioned them, "Manifesting abundance." The destination wedding was planned for Santorini, with a price tag that, once you added up the chartered sunset cruise, the villa rental, the private chef, and the custom floral installations, hovered somewhere north of $80,000. That's when the idea must have taken root. I imagine it now like a seed in poisoned soil, sprouting tendrils while they sat around the kitchen table in a house that wasn't theirs, deciding that their son's wedding mattered more than their other son's legal rights. The math was simple in their heads. The house was worth $450,000. Marcus was being unreasonable, threatening to uproot them, to sell the family home out from under them. Marcus was rich. He'd be fine. Brandon deserved this wedding. He deserved a perfect start, a beautiful memory, a story to tell. And wasn't family supposed to sacrifice for each other? Wasn't that the whole point? They forgot a few things. They forgot that family is not a blank check. They forgot that I had spent my 20s sacrificing so that I could have a future, not so that I could fund a spectacle for a brother who had never once asked me how I was doing. And most importantly, they forgot that the house was never theirs to sell. They forgot that the deed, the actual deed, was in my name and my name alone. They forgot that I never signed anything over because, in their emotional calculus, ownership was determined by who deserved it, not by who held the paper. I found out through a neighbor, Mrs. Calloway, an 80-year-old widow who lived 2 doors down and still baked me zucchini bread every Christmas, called me one Tuesday afternoon. "Marcus, dear, I didn't know you were moving. There's a for sale sign in the yard, a lockbox on the door too. Your mother said it was all very sudden." I nearly drove off the road. I pulled over, hands shaking, and called a real estate attorney I knew from college. Then I opened the county property records online. There it was, a listing, posted 3 weeks earlier, with my house described as a lovingly maintained family home, turnkey condition, motivated sellers. The sellers were listed as my parents, presenting themselves as owners. They had apparently found a naive agent who didn't check the title, or perhaps they'd fed her a story about being the beneficial owners while the deed was just a technicality. They'd accepted an offer. The closing was scheduled for August 14th. I didn't call them. I didn't confront them. I sat with the information for 2 days, letting it crystallize into something cold and sharp. I hired a lawyer. I contacted the title company's fraud department. I filed a police report, providing my original deed, tax records, and the occupancy agreement that proved they were nothing more than tenants. The detective assigned to the case, a tired woman named Detective Ramos, listened to the story and sighed. "It's a civil matter mostly, but we can be there at the closing to prevent the fraudulent transfer and make an arrest if necessary. You want to do this face to face?" I did. More than I had ever wanted anything. The closing meeting itself was a study in slow-motion destruction. I let them walk in, let them sit down, let them start to explain my presence away as a surprise guest, a supportive older brother. My mother tried to pat my hand. "Marcus, we didn't know you'd be here. This is wonderful, actually. You can see how happy we are. We wanted to surprise you, too. We know you've been so stressed about the house, and we found a way to take that burden off your shoulders. We can all be together now, and Brandon and Kelsey can have their wedding without worrying about money. It's a blessing." I let her talk. I let her spin the story into something beautiful and selfless, the version where they were the saviors, and I was the ungrateful child who just needed to see the light. Then I opened the envelope and laid the original deed on the table. The room went quiet. The title agent, a woman in a navy blazer, leaned forward, her face shifting from confusion to alarm. Brandon's expression curdled. Kelsey started scrolling through her phone, as if searching for an escape route. My father's jaw tightened. My mother's smile froze and then collapsed. "This is the deed to the property at 1427 Maplewood Lane," I said, my voice steady in a way that surprised me. "It's in my name. Only my name. I bought this house 8 years ago. I've paid every tax bill, every insurance premium, every repair. You've been living here as tenants under a written agreement that you both signed. You have no ownership interest. You have no right to list, show, or sell this house. What you've done is fraud, and there are consequences for that." My mother's voice rose, thin and desperate. "But we're your parents. We gave you everything. We raised you. We fed you. We loved you. This is just a house. You can buy another one." "You have so much, Marcus. Your brother deserves this chance. Don't do this to your family." I looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the old pull of guilt. I felt clarity, the kind that comes when a long-ignored fracture finally breaks clean through. "You raised me," I said, "and I've been paying for that ever since. I gave you a place to live when you had nowhere else to go. I sent money every month while Brandon was failing out of programs you funded. I worked through holidays and skipped vacations so I could build something of my own, and you decided that because I succeeded, I owed you the fruit of all that labor. You didn't ask me, you didn't talk to me, you sold my house behind my back like I was a child who didn't know better, and you did it to pay for a wedding that costs more than most people make in 2 years. That's not love. That's theft." My father stood up, face red. "You ungrateful little. After everything we sacrificed for you, you'd throw your own mother and father out on the street for a piece of paper?" "You're not on the street yet," I said, "but you will be. The sale is null and void. The title company is aware of the fraud. The police are outside. You can either leave quietly now, or you can leave with an escort." Brandon finally spoke, his voice cracking. "Bro, don't do this. This is insane. I'm your brother. Kelsey and I already put deposits down. You're going to ruin the wedding over what? A technicality? You know Mom and Dad thought you'd be okay with it. You never even lived there." The audacity almost made me laugh. Almost. I never lived there because I was busy earning the money to buy it. And that technicality is called the law, Brandon. You've spent your whole life treating me like a safety net, an ATM, a backup plan for every bad decision you make. Not this time. This time, the safety net is gone. I turned to the title agent. "The closing is canceled. All further communication goes through my attorney. This property is no longer for sale, and these people are being evicted effective immediately under the terms of the occupancy violation clause they agreed to when they moved in." Detective Ramos entered the room then, her presence a quiet punctuation mark. My mother began to cry, a loud, performative wail that I recognized from every childhood argument she'd ever lost. My father put his arm around her, glaring at me with a hatred that, even in that moment, felt more genuine than any affection he'd shown me in years. Kelsey was already pulling Brandon toward the door, hissing something about how embarrassing this was. Brandon looked back at me, and I saw it. Not regret, not sorrow, but the bewildered shock of someone who has never faced a real consequence, finally crashing into a wall. I stayed seated until they were gone. The room smelled like coffee and betrayal. I gathered the deed, tucked it back into the envelope, and walked out past the receptionist, who was now openly staring. Outside, the August heat hit my face like a damp towel. I stood on the sidewalk for a long time, letting the reality settle into my bones. I had done it. I had stood up to them, exposed them, and in doing so, I had blown up every remaining bridge. There would be no reconciliation, no tearful apology, No family gatherings where everyone pretended it never happened. I was now, officially and irrevocably, the villain in their story. And I was fine with that. The eviction process was swift. My parents had no legal grounds to fight it, and the fraud evidence made any sympathy from a judge impossible. They moved out within 30 days, leaving behind a mess of broken picture frames, dead roses in the garden, and a handwritten note on the kitchen counter. My mother's handwriting, wobbly and tear-stained. "We hope your money keeps you warm at night. You'll die alone, and you'll deserve it." I read it once, folded it, and dropped it in the trash. Then I hired a cleaning crew, a painter, and a real estate agent who understood the full story. I sold the house 6 months later for $460,000 and used the proceeds to purchase a 4-unit apartment building, the kind of investment that generates income without emotional tenants. My parents and Brandon were blocked on every channel: phone, email, social media. They tried to reach me through relatives, through old friends, through a letter written by a pastor I'd never met. I threw the letter away without opening it. Some nights I replay the conversation I never had with them, the one where I explain in a calm, rational voice that love is not measured by how much you can take from someone before they break. I tell them that a parent's job is to equip a child for the world, not to shackle them to a lifetime of rescue payments. I tell my brother that being a golden child is not a career plan, and that my success was never his inheritance. But in real life, none of them would have listened. They were too deep in their own narrative, the one where I was the villain, the miser, the heartless monster who chose a piece of paper over blood. They would never understand that the piece of paper was never just a deed. It was the boundary I had failed to draw for 3 decades. There is a specific kind of grief that comes when you realize your family's love has always been a transaction. It feels like a door closing in a house you thought you'd live in forever. But grief fades, and what's left is space, a vast, uncluttered emptiness where the obligations and the guilt used to live. I filled that space with quiet mornings, with work I enjoyed, with friendships I'd neglected while I was busy managing my family's chaos. I filled it with the knowledge that I had not done anything wrong, that protecting what you've built is not cruelty, that saying no to exploitation is not abandonment. I still think about my parents sometimes, wonder if they're renting a cramped apartment now, if my father's back is worse, if my mother still tells people about the son who betrayed her. I wonder if Brandon and Kelsey ever got their Santorini wedding, or if the humiliation of that day made Kelsey reconsider the life she was marrying into. I don't look them up. I don't ask. The curiosity is a ghost, not a hunger. The last thing I did before I sold the house was walk through every empty room, touching the walls I had paid for, the floors I had refinished with my own savings, the windows I had replaced after a hailstorm they never told me about. I stood in what had been their bedroom and remembered all the times I'd sat at their kitchen table, hoping for a conversation that wasn't about money or Brandon or what I owed them. I let myself feel the sadness, and then I let it go. The house was just a house. The family was just a story they told themselves, a story I no longer had to believe. When I handed the keys to the new owners, a young couple expecting their first child, I felt something close to peace. They asked why I was selling such a nice place. I told them I was ready for a fresh start. They smiled, thanked me, and walked inside their new home. I got in my car and drove away without looking back. The deed was in my name, but the freedom, that was something no one could ever sell.